Welcome everyone. My name is Valerie Edgeworth and I am one of the continuing education consultants here at KDLA. With me today is Alicia McGrath. She'll be here assisting with any technical needs or any other needs you might have at this point related to today's session on probate records, and type any questions that you have at any point in time into the chat box, and Alicia will make sure that I get all of the questions answered. Also below the chat box, I have a pod loaded there called Download the Presentation. You can click the name of the file and the download button will appear and we'll walk you through the steps to download. I also have the steps available at the end of the presentation and we'll go through that there. Okay, as long as everybody can hear me, we're going to go ahead and get started. This session is an overview of Kentucky probate records. Once again, if you've attended any of my other sessions on Kentucky's genealogical records, this is what I consider the Kentucky Genealogical Bible. It is Kentucky Ancestry, a guide to genealogical and historical research by Dr. Roseanne Hogan. This book is still available for purchase on Amazon. If you don't have it in your collection, I highly encourage you to get this book. It breaks down every record type and any other details you might ever want to know about Kentucky records, where to find them, and how to find them. Obviously, this book is pre-internet. However, the resources in this book are second to none, so I highly encourage you to get it, and that's where our materials are coming from today. First of all, let's define probate. Probate is the court procedure by which a will is proved to be valid or invalid. It encompasses all matters and proceedings pertaining to the administration of estates, guardianships, etc. That definition comes from Black's Law Library. Probate records is not just one record, it's a series of records. And what we're going to do today is explore the various types of probate records you may be able to find when doing your historical research. I use the word may because not all record types exist for all counties. The majority of them do. However, just because you have a will doesn't mean you'll have a bond or a petition. But there's a chance that all of these types of records may exist. So we're going to break them down one at a time. First, a will. A will is a document in which a person specifies the methods to be applied in the management and distribution of his or her estate after their death. And a will be filed in the county court. No other location. It will be filed in the county court. Order books. This is referred to as a county court order book, and this is the book where the records of the activities of the state will be recorded. It can tell you the date that the will was entered into the court, the name of the people who were there in court when the will was filed, those who presented the will, witnesses to the will, settlements and statements of associated accounts, and the guardian of children. Amy, I'm going to refer your question to Alicia, and we'll see if we can try and get things worked out. Not sure if we will. We are recording the session, so if it's not working, you will be able to view it on our archived webinars page. Most counties do have county court order books, so we'll go ahead and state that at this point. Executor and administrator bonds. These may exist as an executor and administrator bond book. It could just be called an executor book. It could be called an administrator bond book. It could also be referred to as a guardian bond book. Again, across various counties, there may be different titles, variations of the titles, or the books may not exist at all. Again, dependent upon the county and the time when you're researching. The definition of an executor. The executor of a will is typically appointed by the deceased prior to death if he left a will. This will also include relationship information, which is very, very helpful in doing genealogical research. If you have an administrator of a will, that means that they were appointed by the court to be a will, and the deceased may not have had an executor ahead of time. A guardian will be appointed if minor children are involved. It may not be the mother. That is a very key point. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about women here shortly, but a guardian could not be the mother of the children. They could not always act legally for themselves in Kentucky history in researching these historical records. It doesn't necessarily mean that the mother was dead, unfit, or unable to care for her children. She just could not serve as the guardian for the children related to a will or a probate. Hope that makes sense. If not, ask away. Appraisals and inventories. A committee of 2 or 3 appraisers might be appointed if a settlement was necessary. They were men, typically, in historical research. They were often neighbors of the deceased or referred to as trusted citizens. They would submit an inventory to the county court. I will tell you right now, if you find appraisals and inventories, they are some of the most fascinating records I have ever encountered in my research, and it includes everything down to how many pounds of butter may have existed in an icebox. That they are very valuable and very interesting to research. So every single item in the estate would be given a value. It could be recorded with the will or in a separate volume, again, that's referred to as inventories and settlements or inventories and appraisements. It was a truly detailed and unique glimpse into the daily lives of these people, and inventories were usually taken room by room. All of their possessions are listed. It gives you an entire complete picture of a household as it existed at the time of the death. And for a historical researcher, that is just very vital and key information. Sales and settlements. Following the recording of an appraisement and inventory, there may be a sale of the estate. The sale will record each item sold, its price, and the name of the purchaser. Relatives and neighbors were typically purchasers, so attention to the sale of the record can result in clues about relatives and the husbands of married daughters. Once the sale is complete, the estate will be settled. It is here that all the heirs will be listed with their spouses. If land is partitioned in the settling of the estate, those records would be recorded in the deeds. The division of land records may be the only other probate record entered into those county records. So once you're starting to sell land and parse goods, this is where land and deed records research can come in very, very handy. Intestate settlements. Intestate means without a will. Even if a person died intestate or without a will, there may be records of the estate. For example, an administrator would still have to be appointed, and a settlement would still be made if the deceased owned any property. After a settlement, heirs would often exchange or buy out another heir to consolidate land holdings, and as a result, here we go again, deeds are very important to consult if the deceased died without a will. In any case, if the deceased held property, the deed should always be checked to see how land was disposed of after the death. Key little piece of research here, when you're checking deed indexes under the surname of the deceased, under H for heirs, and sometimes under S for settlement, it was not necessary to file a new deed if land remained in the family after the death. So if it did end up going to an heir of the family, there may not be a deed after all. Again, all these records may or may not exist. Probate's kind of difficult sometimes. Another source that can document the death of an intestate ancestor are what's referred to as commissioner's deeds. Sheriff's deeds has also been used very sparingly. I've mainly seen these listed as commissioner deed books. Sheriffs and master commissioners had the power to settle an estate if the heirs were unable or unwilling to come to an agreement. These transactions are often maintained in separate volumes in Kentucky, so again, by county. These are special deeds recorded in the deed books or, again, as I said, in the commissioner's deed book. Again, you may want to look under S for sheriff or C for commissioner if you don't find it under the person's last name. Contesting a will. If the settlement was contested by the heirs, a lawsuit would be filed in circuit court. Depositions would be taken, relationships are established, and supporting documents presented to the court during the court proceedings. All of this material would be filled with the case files. After the settlement of the suit by the court, these cases would be filed in circuit court clerk's office, and the location of the papers would be listed in an off-docket index. Suits filed for the settlement of an estate were very commonplace and should always be checked. If there was a suit, all probate records relative to the case may also be with these case files, meaning that you would find a copy of the will in the circuit court case file. Okay, this is one of my most favorite slides and most frustrating slides ever, and you will always see it in any presentation I give about genealogical research in Kentucky. Kentucky has experienced many what we refer to as courthouse disasters throughout the years. Please bookmark this link for future reference if you haven't already. This link on the KDLA website lists all counties alphabetically. It will give you information on when the county was formed, as well as information when there were courthouse disasters. Adair has not had any to date, but as you can see, Bell County has experienced 4. I know here in Franklin County, our most recent courthouse disaster was actually in 2006. A disaster means fire, flood, some sort of natural occurrence that may limit the amount of records that are available for research. And unfortunately, a lot of times these probate records that we're talking about are affected. So if you don't see what you're looking for, say I was searching in Bath County in 1863, and it says that no wills are available for that time period. Well, I look at the disaster list and I see they had a disaster in 1864. More than likely, they were affected by that disaster. Before I go any further, are there any questions about the various types of probate records as we've kind of broken them down here? Okay, moving right along. Where do you find Kentucky Probate Records? There's several places you can look for them. You can go to your county courthouse to find those records. They are a public record, meaning that they are open for anyone to go in and view after they have been filed. And those records, again, indexing is usually really good with probate records and goes back pretty long into the history of our statehood here. Some of the early records may not be indexed at all. It may just say loose wills. They may just hand you a box and say, here, go through it, good luck, have fun. I think that's part of the fun of it. But you can go to the county courthouse and get those records. Here at KDLA, through our local records grant program, we have worked very diligently over the last, almost 40 years to provide grants for the preservation of wills and probate records is one of the collections we've worked closely with, to microfilm and preserve those records here. All of that microfilm collection is available here at KDLA. It's also available for purchase should your public library be interested in purchasing that series of records for your Kentucky room or your local genealogical room. Many of you have done that in the past, I'm aware of. You can purchase that film and make it available to your researchers there at the library. Again, as I just mentioned, a lot of you have done that, and those are available for your users at your public library. The Kentucky Historical Society, in their microfilm collection, they have purchased copies of our film from here, and those are available in their microfilm room. The other reason I bring up the Historical Society is they have a wonderful secondary resource collection divided by county in their library, where many genealogists and historians have taken the time to actually physically index and make indexes available for various record types. And so if there's not an index available for whatever county you're looking in, the Historical Society book collection may have a bibliographic source that can help you where someone has taken the time to do that for you. And the Historical Society collection is not circulating. However, you can contact their reference desk and they will work with you on that if there's a particular name you're looking for, or if you want to see if you can get a scanned copy of that resource to have behind the desk to help your researchers. They will help you with that material as well. Family search. I bring family search up next. Family search has been growing and increasing tremendously over the last 20 years. Our original collection of microfilm for county records, including probate records, was filmed by the Genealogical Society of Utah in the 1960s when they came through and did scans of courthouses all throughout, not just Kentucky, but the entire United States, and started filming these records. That's actually how our microfilm collection at KDLA started. But what they have done in the last 10 years with that microfilm collection is make it free and available online through FamilySearch.org. And you can actually narrow it down. You can search by a person. If you know your person, you know it's Kentucky, put all that information in, and a resource may pop up saying this probate record's available from this county in this time period. The other neat thing to do is you can actually just search by collection, and Kentucky Probate Records is a collection, and you can literally go in, divide it, or look by county, just look by time period, and scan some records. But they are all physically loaded there for free Cannot stress that enough. And the viewer is very user-friendly. I've used it in Internet Explorer. I've used it in Chrome. I've used it in Firefox. You can save the records right to your desktop. They can print copies of them right then and there. I just think that's really neat. So again, a nice free resource available to everyone at familysearch.org. The other collection I like to talk about is Ancestry. We provide access to Ancestry to our users here at KDLA. I know most of you might do that as well in your local libraries. And again, they have purchased our film here from KDLA. It all goes back to the same collection of records from here, and have scanned those and indexed them and made them available on Ancestry.com. One important thing I tell our researchers here, if they've got several ancestors they're looking for across many different counties, go to Family Search, go to Ancestry, because you can search across county lines at that time. Or if they're here in Frankfort, come to KDLA, come to KHS, and they can search across those collections. It's at this point that I like to let you know, so that in your reference interactions with your customers, you can say this. They're not going to come to KDLA and be able to access the original file if we have it here. If it's available on film, we're going to ask that they use the film first. We've tried to make every effort to make all of our microfilm readable. I know that's not always the case, and at times, if it's deemed necessary, the research room staff, if we do house the originals here, we'll make the originals available. But if it's available on film, we want to try and preserve those paper records as best we can. And by doing that, we have access to the film. Any questions at this point? I wanted to talk a little bit about women and probate records, just from old inheritance laws, because I just find this fascinating. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go into this just a little bit about women and historical records, and then we'll see if anyone else has a question at this point. Although women could dispose of a separate estate that she owned by will as early as 1867, Kentucky was one of the few states that did not permit a married woman to will property that would otherwise have descended to her husband's heirs. So if a woman in late 19th century Kentucky, she did not have the right to inherit her husband's property if there was an heir apparent in the children, which I find to be just kind of a fascinating fact. But if she owned the land on her own, she could will that to whomever she deemed that she wanted to will that to. Property given or devised to a woman with the express intent of it being under her control and not for the use of her husband was considered a separate estate. In 1894, a statute was passed that allowed a married woman of sound mind and over the age of 21 to dispose of her estate by her own last will and testament that was pertained to other provisions of the Barber-Carroll Act. Quite an odd source, and not one that I know a lot about. Widows are a separate issue. Widows could and did make wills. Widows could bequeath the crops from their land and tenements, but they could not actually bequeath the land itself. I find women's history fascinating. I know we've got Women's History Month coming up. The rights of women over the years continues to change and evolved, and it's very apparent in the records when these changes took place. So again, very limited rights with wills and probates in estate unless the woman already owned the estate herself. If it was the estate of her husband and there were children, it was automatically bequeathed to the next generation, which I kind of find fascinating. Okay, anywho, on that point, we're done. This is what I love about these quick half-hour sessions. We just kind of go over the records that may exist. I want to give you a breakdown of the types that are there. Again, not every record type exists for every county. And just because a record series exists, it may not exist for the time period that you're looking for. Again, those courthouse disasters, those fires and floods, they are quite frustrating when doing early Kentucky research. Here are the instructions for downloading the slide presentation from today. And again, the slide presentation is available just below the chat box there. Please don't hesitate to contact us if you have any questions. Please follow us on Twitter and Facebook. We are trying to make many things available there about upcoming trainings and sessions and whatnot. And let's see what we've got coming in here into the chat box now. That is fascinating, Hillary. Fugitive slave activity in Boone County with guardian settlements. The expense of the slave hunting and encases the documentation of the enslaved person escaped. Hillary, and to go right along with that, I researched a case from Mason County very similar to that at one point in time. And I was actually able to use the Auditor of Public Accounts records, which is one of our state government collections here at KDLA. A slave, her name was Peggy, she was referred to as a woman of color, burned down her owner's barn. She escaped and was brought back and was found guilty of burning down that barn, hung to death, and the state reimbursed him as the owner for her value. And that was listed in the Auditor of Account records. Fascinating information can be found, especially with the guardianship. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, if you want more information about those, the Auditor of Public Account records, we can get you in touch with our research room here. But fascinating collections, they all work together. While we're waiting for a few people to type in here, I hope you've enjoyed this session. On March 8th, we have our next training session on Kentucky records, which is going to be Kentucky land records. And this session will actually take an hour because we're going to try to cover not only just deeds as we know them today, but I'm also going to try to go into the history of Kentucky being a land grant state and the various types of land grants that existed, which if you've ever helped anyone with that research, it's enough to make you go crazy trying to figure out all the resources. So we're going to, oh good, Johnny, you just had Candy's presentation. Well, I'm no Candy Atkinson. Candy works at the Secretary of State's Land Office and has wonderful resources, but we'll give a brief overview of Kentucky land records and how they're broken down and where to find them. All right, and if there's no other questions at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording, but we will stay with you for a few minutes if you think of any other questions. Thanks again for attending today. We